executive branch, the Congress, and the courts have all blessed this. And I say, well, I don't care, because when you read the U.S. Constitution, it's still unconstitutional. And that's a very important, when there's a violation of the Constitution of this magnitude, I would prosecute him, but I would prosecute him, just slap his hand or give him a reduced charge. And I think that's what this interview with Brian Williams of NBC was designed to set up. And I think that's what actually may happen eventually.
But what does this say about the people that are within the United States who are getting off from being spied by the National Security Agency? And my look is, hey, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. You want to listen to my phone calls? Go right ahead. You want to see what my mail is? Go right ahead. It doesn't bother me because I have nothing to hide.
Well, it might bother you, though, if they got the wrong guy or they thought you were doing something that you weren't. The government makes, at least in the U.S., I don't know about the Canadian government, but I'm assuming the Canadian government also makes mistakes on occasion. Oh,
sure they do. Sure they do.
And there was a case of that Syrian guy who the U.S. apprehended, and Canada was involved in that, and they tortured him, and it turned out he didn't do anything. And we've had cases, our anthrax attacks after the 9/11, they got the wrong guy for that, and then the second guy that was a suspect committed suicide, and some scientists said he wasn't even the right guy. So we're not even completely sure if we got the right guy in that. The Olympic bombing of a few years ago in Atlanta, they got the wrong guy for that, and they ruined his life. And so the governments make mistakes all the time, and that's why you're not really sticking up for the rights of the criminal. When you're sticking up for the rights of the criminal, you're really sticking up for the rights of everybody who could be falsely accused. And that's what the United States system, at least, and I think the Canadian system, is designed to protect innocent people. And that's why this is so important.
I understand the need to protect the innocent. I really do. I am dead against wrongful prosecution. However, I would much rather have the intelligence agencies with their eyes not only on foreign enemies, but also on domestic enemies. Because as we saw with the Boston bombing, they were domestic enemies who committed a terrorist attack. So where do you draw the line between protecting the citizens and, getting them all up in arms about their privacy?
Well, I think these were the Boston bombing was Americans, but they had foreign connections, and I have no problem with the FBI using their investigative powers in this thing. But what we're talking about, and I don't even have any problem with the spy agencies or the FBI or whatever spying on Americans if they get a warrant. The real problem is warrantless wiretapping. And the reason that you need a warrant in the United States, at least, is because we have a separation of powers, and the courts act as a check on an executive branch. And of course, if you're in the FBI or the NSA, you want to use every technique you can. And the courts have to say, well, listen, you need a warrant to do that. And
but the bad guys don't get warrants. The criminals don't go to the court and say, I want a warrant to commit a criminal act. Plus, we're talking about a constitution where the ability of terrorism and the terrorists to commit the acts that they're doing now with the modern day technology didn't exist. So there has to be, in my opinion, a change. And once again, if law enforcement needs to do something that has been sanctioned by a higher branch of government without getting a warrant, then so be it.
No, I disagree with that. I think you need a judicial warrant just as a check. This really doesn't slow down the process, because if there's an emergency here in the U.S., they have a waiver where they don't have to get the warrant, and they can get it retroactively. And that the system that they had before they started violating, and the Bush administration clearly violated the Constitution and the law by not getting these warrants. The current system worked just fine. They've never pointed to an incident where they didn't have the speed, because they do have that capability to waive the warrant if it's really a national emergency, and then they go back and get it late, after the fact. And also, I think we can tend to overstate the threat of terrorism. Your chances, if you're an American, and it's probably even less for Canadian citizens, your chances of ever being killed by an international terrorist are 1 in 80,000, which is about the same as being struck by an asteroid. And you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than ever being killed by a terrorist. So terrorism is still a rare thing. And also, we stir up a lot of these groups overseas, and that's why they do attack the United States. And I think if we did less of that, then there wouldn't be a trade-off between civil liberties and security, because we wouldn't have to face that. But North America, before 9/11, and it's continued after 9/11, is probably the safest continent in the world as far as terrorism. And the reason for that is terrorism are just like other military forces. They have difficulty operating when their logistics lines are very long, and there's big oceans on either side of Canada and the United States, which keep us safer than other places on terrorism. In the State Department's terrorism reports, there was only like 0 or 1 incident for most of the years leading up to 9/11, and I think we're still very low on terrorism on a normal basis.
Well, could the reason for that be that the action that the security and intelligence agencies have taken since 9/11?
Well, as I say, I suppose you could attribute to that, but we didn't have much terrorism before 9/11, so that sort of destroys that argument. If you didn't have much before, 9/11 was sort of a one-off event. That's been the largest terrorist attack that a group has committed. Now, of course, nations have committed terrorism on a far grander scale than groups have. But as far as groups, that's a big outlier if you were to do a statistical analysis. And that's not saying it couldn't happen again, but certainly the security measures have probably provided some measure of making it less likely to happen. So one of the best things they did was probably harden the cockpit doors in aircraft so that you may be able to hijack an aircraft, although that would be less chance of that too. But certainly it's a big block on hijacking a plane and running it into a building, which is really what you don't want it to have happen. I mean, you could still blow up a plane, but then you just blow up the people on the plane, and that's bad enough. But it's not as bad as killing thousands in a skyscraper.
Well, I'm sure that the families of the aircraft that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, would strongly disagree with you on that, because whether it's 3,000 some odd like it was in New York City, or those passengers and crew aboard the airliner that those people fought so brilliantly to save others by having that plane go down, I'm sure those families are saying, well, geez, one life lost to terrorism is too many.
Well, I understand that, and I'm not saying that any terror, no matter who gets killed by a terrorist, I'm not minimizing that. But what I am saying is that, and that's an example of probably the biggest thing that happened after 9/11. On 9/12, we were a lot safer if the government hadn't done anything, and it's because the paradigm shifted right in the middle of that terrorism attack. Previously, air crews and passengers were really instructed to play along with the terrorists. You might get hijacked to Cuba. They might shoot one person to show they're tough and so that the other passengers don't rebel. But most of the people will probably walk away from this alive but scared, right? Well, that paradigm changed because these were being used as a suicide weapon. And you saw that fourth plane. It seems as if what happened is, you're exactly right, the people did courageously rebel, and the reason that they did was because they realized that they were all going to die too, and they were going to take a lot more people with them.
Sure.
And so, of course, now, and you've seen this paradigm change with the underwear bomber, or the guy who's trying to light his shoes on fire. Mm-hmm. Air crews and passengers, they don't put up with anything anymore. People will the other passengers will tackle the guy and put him under the table. So I think that's a big that's a big improvement as to on security, and that's not even a governmental thing, really.
You know what I couldn't understand that I thought was totally stupid? One of the biggest stupid blunders that they had ever done, knowingly or that just never crossed anybody's mind, was when they decided, in their infinite wisdom, to decrease the number of air marshals on flights. What do? They tell the media. What does the media do? Tells everybody. So here you've got a situation that, in my opinion, is just beckoning trouble to come on board again.
Well, air marshals are one thing that they can do. I think air travel is pretty safe with the cockpit doors and the surly passengers nowadays. But they probably shouldn't have told people they're reducing the air marshals because So I mean, certainly the air marshals help out as well, but I'm not sure all this equipment at the airport that annoys everybody is really helping out that much. But people seem to like it, and if they want to like it, that like I said, the terrorism threat is you have to keep it in perspective, and we can't just run around and destroy the country's constitutions and stuff by making them a quasi police state or whatever.
Exactly.
But because I think you have to put the threat in perspective. Certainly, terrorism is bad, but not that many people get killed by terrorism, and that the people that do get killed, it's really bad, it's really awful. But I think from a policy standpoint, if you pull yourself away from, if you've lost a relative, then you're probably not going to be very rational about it. But if policymakers have to pull themselves away, and you really have to put the threat in perspective, and I think you also think that the United States is never very good at analyzing why things happen, like why Pearl Harbor happened. If you ask the average American what led up to Pearl Harbor,
I've got to take my final break here. Please stand by. Please stand by, Ivan. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Exonation, Ivan Eland is my guest. We'll be back. Don't go away. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Exonation, Dr. Ivan Eland is our special guest this hour. He is the Senior Fellow and Director at the Center on Peace and Liberty, which is at the Independent Institute. His website is www.independent.org.